So today we're going to have a quick look at the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's an incredibly famous book. It's always top of the charts on Amazon when it comes to personal development and building wealth. And it's a really good place to start if maybe you've been in a salaried job, or maybe you're still studying and you're trying to figure out how can I get somebody to help me and what lessons do I need to learn so that I can build up my wealth from the very beginning. And this is a beginner's guidebook. It's more about shifting your mindset from I've got to work for my money, on an hourly rate or on a salaried income, to shifting your mindset to I want to put money into working for me rather than working for money. And so Rich Dad, Poor Dad is kind of trying to pull you out of what he describes as the rat race and on the fast track towards building up your wealth to where you want it to be. And the premise behind the book is that the poor dad is thinking that money is evil and you've got to work hard and you've got to study and it takes a long time to build up wealth, versus money should work for me. I love money. I don't have to work really hard for the money. I got to find the smart way to do things rather than the hard way. And so what I'm going to do is pull out a few little bits in the book, and the premise behind it is the guy Robert, he grew up and his dad was very highly educated, worked hard his whole life, but didn't do things that were business minded. He always thought that he was very risk adverse, didn't really put money into investments and anything like that. And then he had advice from a mentor that when he was a young age, he worked for this guy who taught him how to make money in creative ways and more with a business mind. So if we pull a few bits out of here, one of the first lessons that Robert was faced with is he was working for this rich dad of his, which was a mentor to him. On the weekends he would go and do jobs for him and get paid. For a little wee while he was paid a small salary, and then he was offered bigger salaries, but what he was actually offered was, hey, you work for me for free and I'll teach you how to make money. And so what would happen is sometimes other opportunities would come along, like all his mates would be playing softball in the sun. He grew up in Hawaii, so constant distractions like going surfing, comic books, playing softball. He had to sacrifice so that he could learn the business lessons. And people that are incredibly successful, if you're looking from the outside in, you can think, oh, they got lucky. But generally speaking, these people have made sacrifices along the way. And I get invited to go and play rugby all the time. Aussie rules, I used to play rugby league. There are a lot of things that I used to do that I would still love to be doing, and actually new hobbies that I'd love to pick up. But I know that, I got to put my family first, and then I got to set aside time for business. And business doesn't just mean my 9 to 5. I'm one of the owners of this business, so it's quite often from 7 till 10 p.m. I've got to sacrifice time on hobbies because I want to learn more about property investing all the time and more about wealth building. So sacrifice and learn ideas from mentors. If you're going to the pub, every week on Thursday or Friday or Saturday for a couple of hours, and then maybe you're sleeping in as a result of that on the next day, that's the time you're sacrificing from learning. So what Robert is alluding to is what you want to be doing over the course of your life is building up your assets. So one of the things he helps introduce is a quadrant. So these quadrants, it's kind of like a personal balance sheet. So what he has is income, expenses, assets, and liabilities. And so what he's suggesting that you do is think more about building up your asset column. And the way that you do this is by accumulating things like businesses. So you want to buy or create shares in businesses that don't necessarily require your input. You want to buy stocks and bonds, mutual funds, income generating asset, and that's real estate. That's where we are most interested. So you want to be looking at property investments, and royalties from intellectual property. Pretty much anything that has value, that produces income and appreciates. So if you just work your 9-to-5 job and you don't accumulate property, the odds are that the only real asset you're going to have is savings, cash savings. It's not going to get you to your income, your passive income goals. And Robert alludes to is there's two kinds of investors. The most common type are people that buy packaged investments, stocks, bonds. They buy like new build property, and you're buying it pretty much off the shelf. And the second type of investor is the one that creates investments or creates opportunity. So this is somebody that buys a property on a big bit of land, and maybe they put a minor dwelling, or they get subdivisions done, and they might look to partner up with a friend or a bunch of friends to buy a property because they can't afford to buy it themselves. So if you want to be an off-the-shelf investor, that's fine, but the people that generally make the most money and build up wealth the fastest are people that create investments. And so you need to know how to find opportunities that everyone else has missed, and the way that you can do that is doing lots of research and talking to mentors. And you need to learn about how to raise money and how to find people that will partner with you, and how to organize these people. And if you're knowledgeable in a particular market or in doing a type of deal, then you can be a hub for your friends and family for that type of deal. Robert also alludes to overcoming your obstacles, and a lot of these are self-imposed or they're mental obstacles. So like fear, cynicism, laziness, bad habits, arrogance. So generally speaking, people know if they're lazy. So if you hit snooze every day, if you're scared about putting money into property investments, or what you've got to do is find people you trust and try and retrain your brain to be excited about investments, to excited about opportunities. There's a lot to it. We're not going to cover it now, but really worth looking at that chapter on overcoming obstacles and getting started. So Robert talks about finding deals of a lifetime, and he says it's not just going to happen. You can't just rely on school to teach you how to do deals. You've got to find people that are going to help you, and you've got to do a lot of reading and watching videos that are going to educate you on how to do these deals. And Bigger Pockets is a good place to start. There's podcasts and online resources for that. So if you don't have a strong purpose or a strong reason why you're going to build up your wealth, then it's unlikely you're going to dedicate time to it every single week. And so if you don't understand, I'm building up wealth for my grandkids, and so that I can go on holidays all the time, and you're not constantly thinking about that, then you will make short-term decisions like, hey, maybe I should watch the footy today instead of analyzing 20 or 30 properties. What I like to do is I love watching the All Blacks, and I quite often watch them live. But for games that I'm interested in, maybe it's Canterbury versus Wellington Super 15, what I'll actually do is I'll just watch the highlights and maybe even put it on mute and read a book while I'm doing that. And I find that, okay, I'm doing two things at once. I'm downloading this knowledge into my brain, and I feel like I'm not missing out on the footy. What you've got to understand is every minute that you spend doing something is a sacrifice not doing something else. And without your focus and the long-term vision, it's very hard to do that. Robert also talks about choosing your friends carefully. So, power of association. You really are the sum of your group of friends. So you can't just choose rich friends. Sometimes you've got to bring something to the party that those people that have wealth and have good ideas will want to be friends with you too. But if all of your friends are not building wealth and don't care about anything other than paycheck to paycheck, then it's likely that you're going to be in that same boat. So you don't have to necessarily give up those friendships, but spending less time with them and trying to spend more time with financially savvy mentors is going to be a better use of your time. And you don't have to be face to face with these people. You can read their books, you can watch their videos on YouTube, and quite often those sources of information allow you to re-watch them, relearn, and you can have 100 mentors online if you want, as long as you really are diligently taking in the information. A couple of last quick points. If you're not going to take action, then things aren't going to happen. So you need to find someone that has done what you've want to do, and try and emulate that. Try and copy what they've done. Take classes, buy tapes, and make lots of offers. So my business partner, he made about 50 offers on different property investments, but when he was trying to buy his last property, and then he ended up getting about, I think it was like 80 grand discount on the revalue after he bought the property. So what that means is the owners were trying to sell the property for over 700k. He paid about 600k, and then it got revalued 6 months after he bought it at just over 700k. So it's not lowballing, but it's offering. Making lots of property offers is going to net you good results, even if it takes you 100 offers to get a really good buyer, a good deal. It is worth your time. If you're making a property offer every single week, and then only once a year those offers are being accepted, then you can actually make 50 to 100 grand just through that one deal. And one last thing I want to suggest is, when you do read books, have a look at the back of the book, because there's often recommended reading, and it's called a bibliography of books that are referred to or used as to help write this book. And there's some awesome books in here. I've read a lot of them, like E-Myth, As a Man Thinketh, The Warren Buffett Way, even Trump, The Art of the Deal's in here, Unlimited Wealth, Unlimited Power. There's lots of really good book suggestions in here. So if you are not quite convinced, or you're really just beginning on your property investment journey, I do suggest Rich Dad Poor Dad for learning about the quadrants, about focusing on minimizing your expenses and your liabilities and maximizing your asset and income column. That's a real mind shift for a lot of people. And if you don't have somebody in your corner giving you good investment and business and finance advice, it's a good place to start with here. You don't have to just listen to your old man or listen to somebody that's been in your ear your whole life. If they're not rich, then odds are So today we're going to have a quick look at the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's always famous charts on Amazon when it comes to the charts on personal development and building wealth. Personal development. It's a really good place to start. It's a really good place to start. Maybe you've been in a salary job, or maybe you've been in a salary job, or trying to figure out studying and how can I get somebody to help me, and how can I get somebody to help me, and what I can build up my wealth, so that I can build up from the very beginning my wealth. And this is a beginner's guidebook. And this is a beginner's guidebook. Shifting your mindset from shifting your mindset. I've got to work from my money. I've got to work on an hourly rate, money, or on a salary income rate, to shifting your mindset to shifting your mindset to I work and put money rather than working for me, and so rather than working for money, is kind of trying to pull you out of what he describes as the rat race, what he describes as the fast track towards building up your wealth, towards building up your wealth to where you want it to be. The premise behind the book is, the premise behind the book is that the poor dad is evil, and you got to work hard, and you got to study, you got to work hard, and you got to study. It takes a long time to build up wealth. It takes a long time to build up wealth. Money should work for me. I love money. Money should work for me. I don't have to work really hard for the money. Really hard for the money. Smart way to do things. I got to find the smart way to do things rather than the hard way. What I'm going to do is pull out a few little bits in the book. What I'm going to do is pull out a few little bits in the book. The premise behind it is the guy Robert. The premise behind it is the guy Robert. His dad was very highly educated. His dad was very highly educated, but worked hard his whole life. Didn't do things that were business minded. Didn't do things that were business minded. He was very risk averse. He was very risk averse. Didn't really put money into investments and anything like that. Advice from a mentor that when he was a young age, worked for him how to make money, taught him how to make money in more creative ways and more with a business mind. So if we pull a few bits out of here, one of the first lessons that Robert was he was working for this rich dad of his, which was a mentor to him, which was on the weekends he would go and do jobs. On the weekends he would go and do jobs. For a little bit while he was paid. For a little bit while he was paid, and then he was offered bigger salaries, and then he was offered bigger salaries. Offered was what he was actually offered was free, and I'll teach you how to make money, and I'll teach you how to make money. What would happen is sometimes other opportunities would come along. Playing softball with his son. He grew up in Hawaii. He grew up in Hawaii. Like going surfing, constant distractions like going surfing. He had to sacrifice. He had to learn the business lessons so that he could learn the business lessons. People that are incredibly successful. People that are incredibly successful. You can think of they got lucky outside in. Generally speaking, these people have made sacrifices along the way. I get invited to go and play rugby all the time. I get invited to go and play rugby all the time. I used to play rugby rules. There are a lot of things that I used to do. There are a lot of things that I used to do that I would still love to be doing, and actually new hobbies that I love to pick up. Okay, I got to put my family first. Okay, I got to put my family first. Time for business, and then I got to set aside time for business. Business doesn't just mean my 9 to 5. Business doesn't just mean my 9 to 5 business. So I'm one of the owners of this business. It's quite often from 7 till 10 p.m. I've got to sacrifice time. I've got to sacrifice time more about property investing all the time, and more about wealth all the time. Sacrifice and learn ideas from sacrifice and learn ideas from mentors. Every week, Thursday or Friday or Saturday for a couple of hours. Friday or Saturday for a couple of hours. Sleeping in as a result of that. Maybe you're sleeping in as a result of that. That's the time you're sacrificing from. That's the time you're sacrificing from learning. What Robert is alluding to is what you want to be doing. What Robert is alluding to is what you want to be doing is building up your life, your assets. Is building up one of the things. So he helps introduce a quadrant. A quadrant. So these quadrants. These quadrants. It's kind of like a personal balance sheet. It's kind of like a personal balance sheet. So what he has is income, expenses, assets, and liabilities. And so what he's suggesting that you do, what he's suggesting that you do, is think building up your asset, building up your asset. And the way that you do this is by accumulating things like businesses. You want to buy businesses, shares. You want to buy that don't necessarily require your input. Don't necessarily require your stocks and bonds. You want to buy stocks and bonds, income generating mutual funds, and income generating assets. Where we are, and that's real estate. That's where we are. You want to be looking at most interested. So you want to be looking at property investments from intellectual properties from pretty much anything that has value. Pretty much anything that has value that produces income and appreciates. If you just work your 9 to 5 job, and you just work your 9 to 5 job, and you don't accumulate property, the only real asset you're going to have is savings. The only real asset you're going to have is savings. It's not going to get you to your income. It's not going to get you to your income goals. Robert alludes to is investors. There's two most common type of people that buy packaged investments. They buy like new build property. They buy like new build property, and you're buying it pretty much off the shelf. And you're buying it pretty much off the shelf. The second type of investor is the one that creates opportunities. So this is somebody that buys. So this is somebody property that buys on a big bit of land, and maybe they put a minor dwelling, subdivisions done, and they might look to partner up with a friend, or look to partner up with a bunch of friends to buy a property because they can't buy a property because they can't afford to buy it themselves. If you want to be an off-the-shelf investor, that's fine. People that generally make the most money, people that generally build up wealth the fastest, the people that build up wealth the fastest, the people that create investments. You need to know how to find opportunities that everyone else has missed. And the way that you can do that is doing lots of research and talking to mentors. Doing lots of research and talking to mentors. You need to learn about how to raise money, and how to learn about how to raise money, and how to find people, and how to organize these people, and how to organize. If you're knowledgeable in a particular market, if you're knowledgeable doing a particular market, or you can be a hub deal for your friends and family, hub for your friends and family for that type of deal. Robert also alludes to your overcoming obstacles, and a lot of these are self-imposed, or they're mental like fear, cynicism, laziness, bad habits, arrogance.
Generally speaking, people know if they're lazy.
Generally speaking, people know if you hit snooze every day.
If you hit snooze every day,
if you're scared about putting money into a property investment, property investment,
what you're going to do is find people you trust.
What you're going to do is find people you trust to be excited about investment, to be excited about opportunities. There's a lot to it. We're not going to cover it now. There's a lot to it. We're not going to cover it now. But that chapter on overcoming obstacles. That chapter on overcoming obstacles. So Robert talks about deals of a lifetime. Finding deals of a lifetime. He says it's not just going to happen. You can't just rely on school to teach you how to do deals. You've got to find people that are going to help you. You've got to find people that are going to help you. You've got to do a lot of reading and watching videos that are going to educate you on how to do these deals. Bigger pockets is a good place to start. Bigger podcasts is a good place to start. Podcasts and online resources for that. So if you don't have a strong purpose, if you don't have a strong reason why you're going to build up your wealth, dedicate time to it every single week, every single week. If you don't understand, I'm building up wealth for my grandkids. I'm building up wealth for my grandkids. Go on holidays all the time, and you're not going on holidays all the time, and you're not. Then you will make short-term decisions like, hey, maybe I should watch. Instead of analyzing 20 or 30 properties, what I like to do is I love watching the All Blacks, and I quite often watch the All Blacks, and I quite often watch them live. Games that I'm interested in, Canterbury versus Wellington, Super 15. What I'll actually do is I'll just watch the highlights. I'll just watch the highlights, put it on mute, and maybe even put it on mute. And I find that I'm doing two things at once. I'm downloading the knowledge into my brain, and I feel like I'm not missing out on the footy. What you've got to understand is every minute that you spend doing something is a sacrifice, not doing something else. Without your focus and the long-term vision, it's very hard to do that. Robert also talks about choosing your friends carefully. Power of association. Power of association. You really are the sum of your group of friends. So you can't just choose rich friends. Sometimes you've got to bring something to the party. Sometimes you've got to bring something to the party that have good ideas. Those people that have wealth and have good ideas will want to be friends with you too. But if all of your friends are not building wealth and don't care about anything other than paycheck, it's likely that you're going to be in that same boat. You don't have to necessarily give up those friendships. You don't have to necessarily give up those friendships. Spend more time with them, trying to spend financially savvy mentors. There's going to be a better use of your time. You don't have to be face to face with these people. You can read their books. You can watch their videos on YouTube. You can watch their videos on YouTube and sources of information later. Rewatch them, rewatch them, relearn. You can have 100 mentors online if you want. As long as you really are diligently taking in the information. A couple of last quick points. If you're not going to take action, then things aren't going to happen. If you're not going to take action, then things aren't going to happen. So you need to find someone that has done what you've done, try and copy what they've done, emulate that, try and take classes, buy tapes, and make lots of offers. My business partner, he made about 50 offers on when he was trying to buy his last property. But when he was trying to buy his last property, he ended up getting about discount on the revalue discount after he bought revalue. So what that means after he bought the property. So what that means is the owners were trying to sell the property for over 700K. He paid about 700K. He paid about 600K. 6 months after he got revalued. 6 months after he bought it at just over 700K. It's not lowballing. But it's offering. Making lots of property offers is going to get you good results, even if it takes you 100 offers to get, even if it takes you 100 offers to get a really good deal. It is worth your time if you're making it property offer every single week. Making it property offer every single week. Once a year, those offers are being accepted. Once a year, those offers are being accepted. 50 to 100 grand. Make 50 to 100 grand just through that one deal. And one last thing I want to suggest is have a look at the back of the books. Have a look at the back of the recommended reading. Often recommended reading for your books that are referred to or used as to help write this book. Some awesome books in here. I read a lot of them. Like As a Man Thinketh. as a
Warren
man
Buffett
thinketh,
way,
even Trump the art of the deals in here, even Trump the art of the deals in here, unlimited
power.
wealth. There's lots of really good book
Unlimited
suggestions
power.
in here.
There's
Lots of really good book suggestions in
are
here.
not
So
quite convinced,
if you
or you're
are not
really
quite
just
convinced,
beginning
or
on your
you're
property
really
investment
just
journey,
beginning
I
on
do
your property
suggest
investment
Rich
journey,
Dad Poor Dad
I do
for
suggest
learning
Rich
about
Dad
the
Poor Dad
quadrants,
for learning about
the
focusing
quadrants,
about
minimizing
focusing
your
on
expenses
on
and your
minimizing
liabilities and
expenses and your
maximizing
liabilities and
income
maximizing
column.
That's a
asset
real
and
mind
income
shift
column.
for a lot of
That's
people.
a real
and,
mind shift for a
if
lot
you
of people.
don't have
And,
somebody in your
if you
corner
don't
giving you
have
good
somebody in your
investment
corner
and
giving
business
you
and
good
finance
investment
advice
and business and
finance
it's a good
advice
place to start with here.
It's a
You
good
don't
place
have
to
to
start with.
just listen to
You
your
don't
old
have
man,
to
or listen
just
to
listen to your old
somebody
man
that's been in
or
your ear your whole life.
somebody
If
that's
they're
been
not
in your ear
rich,
your whole life.
and
If
odds
they're
are
not
they're not
rich,
the right ones
and
to be
odds
giving
are
you
they're
the
not the right
advice
ones
that
to be
you need.
giving you the right advice that you need.